To drive home to one American community, you first have to leave the United States. In another, the mail still arrives by mule. And on an Alaskan island, Russia is closer than the nearest highway. These places are not abandoned. Americans live here every day. But getting home, buying groceries, receiving medicine, or leaving during an emergency can depend on a border, a boat, a helicopter, or the weather. So why do people still choose to live here? Point Roberts occupies the southern tip of the Sawasan Peninsula. The 49th parallel, established as the international boundary, cuts directly across the land. This geopolitical line left a 5-square-mile patch politically American, but physically attached to Canada. Driving from Point Roberts to the rest of Washington state requires traveling through British Columbia, crossing international checkpoints twice. The 54-mile trip to the county seat in Bellingham forces residents to travel along Canadian highways before re-entering the United States. Every daily detail, from school bus routes to grocery runs, medical care, and commercial deliveries, depends entirely on border operations. While a transition to 24-hour port operations in July 2026 eased some timing constraints, the international boundary remains a constant filter on daily movement. Over 1,500 miles to the east, the northwest angle in Minnesota presents a similar geographic puzzle. Created by a 1783 Treaty of Paris map-making error, this lake-bound exclave is the only part of the contiguous United States north of the 49th parallel. The land route there runs through Manitoba, requiring motorists to report at the War Road Sprague crossing. This remote transit became more complex after September 14, 2026, when Canada terminated its Remote Area Border Crossing Permit program, shifting all remote entries to mandatory telephone reporting. In both communities, the daily reality of the border dictates their isolation, far more than physical distance. West of the Cascade Mountains, physical geography replaces political boundaries. Stehekin, Washington, sits at the far northern tip of Lake Chelan, within a glacial valley. No highway connects this community of roughly 50 permanent residents to the outside road network. Access requires a 4-hour voyage on the slow-moving Lady of the Lake passenger ferry, a shorter run on the Lady Express, a float plane charter, or a multi-day mountain hike. Every gallon of heating oil, every prescription medication, and every carton of milk must be loaded onto a boat at the southern end of the lake. When a massive winter flood in late 2025 forced the North Cascades Lodge to close for the 2026 season, the ferry docks remained active, carrying essential mail and household supplies to a community that chooses isolation in exchange for privacy, wilderness, and a slower way of life. 3,000 miles east, another water-dependent community faces a similar struggle against the elements. Tangier Island sits in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay, accessible only by boat or small aircraft. Since 1850, coastal erosion and rising sea levels have swallowed 2/3 of the island's landmass, with the most vulnerable ridges retreating by 15 feet every year. Yet, this remains a working community where families harvest blue crabs and oysters, supplying about 13% of the bay's total catch. Daily life depends entirely on a fragile maritime supply chain, including seasonal runs by the Joyce Marie Descent from Onancock, Virginia. When winter ice or gale force winds halt the boats, Tangier is completely cut off, forcing residents to rely on emergency rations and wait for the weather to clear for any critical medical evacuations to the mainland. In western Alaska, the city of Bethel redefines the nature of road isolation. It is not a quiet wilderness outpost, but a regional city of over 6,000 residents, complete with paved streets, local traffic, schools, supermarkets, and public services. Yet, no permanent highway connects Bethel to Alaska's main road network. Every sedan, truck, and delivery van driving through town arrive by cargo plane or river barge. For travelers, aircraft are the normal way in and out of the region. Bulk goods follow a strict seasonal calendar. Heavy freight, construction materials, and fuel must wait for the winter ice to break, allowing marine barges to travel up the Kuskokwim River during the brief summer shipping season. These shipping constraints push grocery prices 57% higher than the national average. Despite the costs, Bethel remains indispensable to Western Alaska. As the central administrative hub for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, this roadless city serves over 50 surrounding Alaska Native villages. Many of these smaller settlements have no medical clinics or major stores of their own, meaning families must travel to Bethel for scheduled flights, household supplies, secondary education, and medical care at the regional hospital. In this part of the state, highway maps are useless. The river and the air are the only roads that matter. Deep within the sheer red walls of Havasu Canyon, a branch of the Grand Canyon, sits the village of Supai. This is the sovereign home of the Havasupai tribe, a community that has lived in these canyons for centuries. No road has ever reached Supai. The only land route is an 8-mile foot trail starting at the Hualapai Hilltop Trailhead on the canyon rim. For the tribal residents, this isolation dictates every aspect of daily life. Daily necessities, including groceries, building materials, medicine, and household goods, must be packed in by animal or air. To make this possible, the United States Postal Service contracts a daily mule train. Operating 5 days a week, these trains of 10 to 22 mules descend the 9-mile trail, with each animal carrying up to 150 pounds of cargo. This mule mail system serves as the community's primary freight connection. For medical needs, the Indian Health Service opened the new Supai Health Station, but it lacks surgical capabilities. Serious medical emergencies require helicopter evacuations, operated by OneSpan, which are highly vulnerable to canyon winds and flash floods. Here, tribal governance and community survival depend on the strength of a trail and the steady foot of a mule. In the middle of the Bering Strait, the sheer cliffs of Little Diomede Island rise directly from the freezing sea. This rocky outpost, home to the Inupiaq village of Ingalik, sits just 2.4 miles from the Russian island of Big Diomede. Across that narrow stretch of water lies the international dateline and a 21-hour time difference. But for the roughly 170 residents, this is not a geopolitical curiosity. It is a permanent homeland shaped by thousands of years of Inupiaq history, family ties, and an enduring connection to the sea. On this steep, roadless island, gravity and weather govern every movement. There are no highways, no runways, and no deep water ports. For over a decade, regular cargo barges have been unable to land, leaving the community almost entirely dependent on a single weekly helicopter flight. Operated by Pathfinder Air under a federal contract, a twin-engine Bell 212 makes a scheduled round trip from Nome every Monday, carrying a critical payload of 1,200 pounds of mail, medicine, and food. This weekly flight is the sole lifeline for the village school, the local clinic, and the homes of families who choose to remain. When winter storms, heavy fog, or shifting sea ice ground the aircraft, the village is instantly cut off. Severe weather can delay supplies for weeks, threatening food security and disrupting basic health care. Medical emergencies become life or death situations. Patients requiring urgent care must wait for a break in the weather for a helicopter evacuation to Nome. Yet, the Inupiaq continue to thrive here. In traditional skin boats called umiaks, hunters harvest bowhead whales, walrus, and seals, maintaining a subsistence lifestyle that feeds the community and preserves their heritage at the absolute edge of the American map. These communities are not forgotten because they disappeared. They are forgotten because most Americans never realize they are still there. Beyond the highways, beyond the borders, and beyond the familiar map, thousands of American stories remain unnoticed. Which would be harder for you? Crossing an international border every time you drive home, or depending on weather for the only way out? Choose one and explain why. Subscribe to America Unnoticed for more stories from the parts of America hiding in plain sight.